I'm Doug Cuney. This is my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how to make naturally fermented pickled eggs. Now I got to admit, until recently I had never tried pickled eggs before. As a young man, when I spent a lot of time wasting my life away in bars, I used to look at these jars of these kind of woe-begone little white orbs and think to myself, that really doesn't look appealing. Well, I decided to try to make them myself, and there's a reason they're still available. They're absolutely addictive. Not only are eggs perhaps the perfect food, but the fact that you can pickle them and keep them in a jar where you just reach in and get what you want it's the perfect food. Now I'm going to show you my process for pickling eggs. And here's what you're going to need. You're going to need a 2-quart canning jar. You can usually pick these up in packs of 6, I believe, at most hardware stores, and they're not that expensive. You're going to need filtered water. You're going to need whey, which I get from making kefir. And the whey holds the lactofermentation culture that starts the fermentation process. So I usually use that in a lot of recipes that I do. You're going to need kosher salt or sea salt. And let's see, I've got my list here. And you don't absolutely need it, but quite a bit of ice, like a rack full of ice. As you might expect, the first thing you're going to need to make pickled eggs is hard-boiled eggs. There's a lot of different recipes for doing it. I've been told 3 or 4 different ways, and they all work. The way that I use one of these pasta pots with the insert in it. I fill it up just below where the insert stops. So the eggs never actually sit in the water. So what I'm going to do is I'll take this out, set it aside, and I'll use the lid on the empty pot, and I'll put the water up to just below where this screen comes, and I'll bring it to a rolling boil. Now, I use this technique for making hard-boiled eggs because you're actually steaming the eggs instead of boiling them. And the advantage to that is your environment is always 212 degrees. If you put your eggs in the pot and you put 2 in and it comes back to a boil, and then you do it the way it's normally done, it's going to take X amount of minutes. If you put in 6, the temperature is going to drop lower. It's going to take longer. So every time you add a quantity of eggs, your cooking times change, which makes it real confusing. When you're using steam, 2 things happen. One is, because you've only got this much water in the bottom and the eggs aren't cooking directly in the water, it never drops below a boil. It just keeps producing steam. Also, the second advantage is that your steam environment at 212 degrees will cook evenly, whether you've got 6 eggs in the bottom of that or 30 or 60. It's still going to take the same amount of time. And we're going to fix 30 eggs, which actually only amounts to a layer and about a half in that size pot that I just put on the stove. So if you are doing more eggs, let's say for some other recipe, or you're making a lot of pickled eggs, I would advise trying the steaming method. You know, another thing that I like about the steaming method of cooking eggs is that it cooks them very evenly. So when you get done with these eggs, you're going to find that they're going to have a very sunny yolk. The yolk is not going to be overcooked. It's not going to be granular. it's going to be a bright yellow, and there's not going to be any of that greenish gray ring that forms around a yolk when it's overcooked. Now, while you're waiting for your water to come to a boil, which as a matter of fact it's already started to do because there's not much water in there, you can use your available time to put eggs into your basket. There's going to be about 30 there, and that should be more than enough. You're going to use probably 28. But if you mess a few up, then you've got extras. Now, another nice thing about this method is that because you have such a little quantity of water, it doesn't take long to come to a boil. So you take your eggs, cover back up, make sure the vents are closed here if you've got vents on them, and you set your timer to 18 minutes. Alright, our time is up, so we'll shut the alarm off, grab a pair of oven mitts, shut the heat off, pick the whole pot up, and start running cold water in it. Now, running cold water will help to start to cool the eggs. And I'm going to add ice. It's not absolutely necessary. First few times I did it, I didn't add any ice. But it seems like if you add ice, leave it for a while, and they chill a little faster and a little more, they seem to peel a little bit easier. Alright, I'll let it fill until it starts to run over the outside of the container. And then I will add the ice. Got some large chunks in there. You can see I don't use a lot of ice. There. Now I'm going to let this sit for about, half an hour. You could leave it longer if you wanted. But by that time the eggs should be sufficiently cool. Alright, the ice is melted and the eggs are cooled. So I'm just going to drain them off. Set them to one side. Now, I'm sure that all of you have peeled eggs before. Now that your eggs are cool, you can go ahead and start peeling them and put them into your 2-quart jar. Now, I'm not going to go into any of the processes I've used to try to come up with eggs that are easy to peel. The ice water bath seems to help, but there's something else that I've noticed that I've heard people tell me about over the years, but I wasn't sure of recently. A friend of mine who raises chickens and for the eggs says that they never make hard-boiled eggs at home because the eggs are almost impossible to peel. And my mother, who grew up on and around a farm, told me that fresh eggs were really hard to peel as opposed to older ones. So if you go to the same source and buy eggs all the time and you get some that are really difficult to peel, the next time you go to buy eggs, buy them a week or so ahead of time, put them in your refrigerator and just let them set. And it really does seem to make a difference. Now you've got your freshly peeled eggs all in your jar, and we're going to make, it's actually the same brine that I use to make sauerkraut or any pickle, and the dilutions are exactly the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a 2-cup measure, and I'm going to take a half a cup of whey. And as I mentioned before, whey is one of the byproducts of lactofermentation. I get mine by making kefir. When I need some whey, I go ahead and I make a large batch of kefir, let it ferment for several days, and it separates, and I get curd and I get whey, and then I use the whey for pickles. And I'm going to put filtered water, a cup and a half of that, so we bring it up to 2 cups. And then 2 tablespoons of sea salt or kosher salt or pickling salt. Don't use iodized salt. It will tend to inhibit or kill the culture. And it's the same dilution that you use for all pickles. It's 1 tablespoon of salt to 1 cup of liquid or cup of water. So we'll add that. Once the salt is dissolved, your brine is ready, and you can add it to your eggs. Now, traditionally, pickled eggs are just left plain. You can brine them just the way they are, and they're great. But if you want to try something different, think about your favorite egg recipes and think about the herbs and the spices that you use in those recipes. Try them in pickled eggs. Now, one of the first recipes that I tried, variation from the traditional, was a kimchi flavored pickled egg, which was very interesting. I had grated fresh ginger, I had crushed garlic, hot chili peppers, and sliced scallion, and that was real interesting. You could try something like lemon or orange zest. The thing that I'm using most now is kind of a takeoff of a Chinese tradition of marinating eggs in tea. And I've found that some of the citrus flavored teas like Constant Comment, Orange Pico, Lady Grey, Earl Grey, those teas work very well. And I found that a combination of whatever tea you choose, rosemary, fennel seed, and just a hint of garlic works very well. So I grind those all together with the exception of the garlic, which I put in whole, and use that as the flavoring for my pickled eggs. And it's got a very understated but subtle flavor that kind of blooms as you're eating the egg. All right, I've added my tea mixture, and all we need to do now is let it ferment. You want to make sure that your eggs are covered by the liquid, just like when you're making any other pickle. In this case, if you need a little more water just to cover the eggs, go ahead and add just a little bit of water. I'm going to put the lid on tight, and I'm just going to give it a good mix. And I'm going to take the lid off. Yep, everything looks good. So I'm going to put the lid on, but I'm going to leave it loose so that any gas that is produced can escape. I'm going to, just like a lot of other recipes I do, you're going to set it aside for 3 days, let it ferment, and at the end of the 3 days you can help yourself to the pickles, put them in the refrigerator, and they'll actually last at least several weeks, but they never stay on hand that long. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'd like to encourage you to subscribe to my channel and share these videos with your friends. I'm Doug Cuny. Until next time, take care.